So it's official then, Gen Z are no longer the generation of moderation.
Are you sure?
Well, yeah, fresh data from drinks analysts IWSR has found that over the last 2 years, the proportion of Gen Z of legal drinking age claiming to have consumed alcohol in the last 6 months has jumped from 66% 2 years ago to 73%. Now, this is across 15 major markets, and it means now that Gen Z pretty much mirrors wider society. And in the US, that jump is even more dramatic, Caitlin. It went from 46% to 70%.
This from the generation that put less but better on the map. More mindful, more intentional, and now more liquid. So what we're saying here is, within Gen Z's world of more authentic, meaningful social time, they're discovering how alcohol consumed responsibly can spark connection, soften the edges, open up the conversation, and so forth.
I think that is what we're seeing here, and it presents, I think, an opportunity for the industry to reimagine alcohol's social role in a way that resonates with generations who value both agency and belonging.
Well, that got us to the center of the vortex very quickly. We need to rewind, kick back, and pour ourselves something to savor as we invite everyone to explore what next for alcohol.
So you may have observed it yourself, listeners, but around the world, people are drinking less. In 2024, total global alcohol volumes consumed fell by 1%. And this means it's a testing time for some of the world's biggest consumer packaged goods companies. And while there's still a lot to play for, I think, in Asia, thanks to the expansion of the middle classes there, if we want to safeguard this sector's future globally, something's got to change.
The causes behind this global contraction aren't straightforward. There's ongoing debate about how much is down to short-term economics and how much is a product of deeper structural change in culture and society. According to new data collected by MMR and Toluna, we know that affordability is the top reason people give for cutting back right now. But close behind this is a cluster of health and well-being motives. And that's the bigger concern here, because these structural shifts suggest that alcohol's role in our lives isn't just shrinking, it's going to keep on shrinking.
I think, tech now fills our every waking moment. Boredom has been eradicated. There is far less incentive nowadays for people to head out and meet friends.
I know that we've published our research findings in an MMR publication called Growth Spaces Quarterly, and I've read your opening statement. You call out one consumer quote above all others. I think the biggest reason people aren't drinking as much is because they don't know how to have honest face-to-face interactions anymore. And that's from a 50-year-old American man, someone who's lived through a lifetime of social change.
It's something that we do flesh out in this Growth Spaces release, and listeners can go to mmr-research.com for their copy. Follow the links on the website. Now, there I argue that the alcohol sector has got to find its purpose, to reimagine its role as a sort of cultural force rooted in experiences, a promotion of connections, people's search for shared meaning, I think.
From what you've been saying, it does feel that the human race needs to rediscover its humanity, and that's before AI has even done its worst. To underline the pressure the alcohol sector's under, even the U.S. craft beer scene, where we've consistently seen growth over the last decade, has stopped booming. We've got fresh data from the Brewers Association that finds craft beer volumes down 4.1% in the first half of 2025, which mirrors a 4.2% decline in the broader beer category here. However, craft hasn't lost fans. There are more drinkers than ever, just drinking less frequently and potentially prioritizing higher quality. So it's not all doom and gloom. Almost half of brewers, that's a literal 49%, are reporting production growth. So to get the insider's view, I'm delighted to welcome Jake Gardner from Westbound Down Brewery of Colorado onto the podcast. Tell us a bit about your operation, Jake.
Hi, guys. Caitlin, thanks for having me on. Yep, again, Jake Gardner, Westbound Down Brewing Company. I am the Director of Brewing Operations and the CEO there. We started out at the very end of 2015, late open a couple weeks in 2015. And we set out to revitalize the American brew pub. We've all been in brew pubs, and some of them are great, some aren't, but they got old wooden booths, and the food is kind of a second afterthought. And we wanted to really bring elevated food and beer together, and we wanted to create community spaces where people wanted to come be together, enjoy nice architecture, great design, great food, and great beer. We've also opened 4 more brew pubs since the original one. And so that's been based on a growth model of what we call the virtuous cycle, which we think ties into a way to bring drinkers in an ever-changing alcohol market and beer market into our spaces to connect with our brand. So how that works for us, and we think is key to our growth and distribution, we have kind of 2 ways you can find us. You could be at a Whole Foods or one of the 600 independent stores in Colorado that carry our brands, soon to be Kroger and Safeway, and you just find our beer at random. That's how a lot of people discover products. But simultaneously, you could look up, we want great food, and you might find that in Westward Magazine or on Yelp that we are one of the highest rated restaurants in the I-70 corridor, and you're just stopping in for a burger or grilled chicken sandwich or any of our great salads. And then you realize we're also making beer there, and you're drinking the beer, and maybe you don't drink beer every day. It's what I call sometimes beer drinkers, but they might drink wine. They might not drink all the time. They might drink heavily, but they're usually wine or cocktail drinkers. But now they're in our space. They realize we're a brew pub. They've listened to our music, our design, our glassware. And that's where I think we have a really captive audience to find people who are now connecting with our brand, that when they're back in those grocery store spaces and you need beer, well, you've been in our space and you've fell in love with our brand there, and you're more likely to pick us up. So that's what we call the virtuous cycle, and I think a way we are different than a lot of other small craft beer brands of the last 10 to 15 years is we really put a lot of emphasis on our food and hospitality program.
What do you think the craft beer sector has to do to continue to earn its space in people's lives in the future? What do you think needs to change?
I think, there's a couple different ways to look at it. I think one of the most obvious ones is I don't find where craft beer is right now as scary. I think it has become a mature market. I think this idea that it was going to grow double digits infinitely was always false. It was going to grow double digits or at some speed till it reached a number in the teens. And I think because it's made here and you factor in things like buying local, supporting your local economy, potentially like knowing the brewers, like, right, we're a team of, 140 employees and 12 people on the brew staff. There's a high likelihood in Colorado, one of us. And then there's that level of connectivity of why you buy. So I think craft beer has the ability to go beyond what import beer represented in the 90s, but not double it. It's not like the big boys of domestic macro beer are not going anywhere. And I think the idea that craft beer was going to take all that over was far-fetched. I do think there's a chance for maybe as much as 50% more total growth, going to like a 17, 18% market share is possible. Not saying I predict it, but I think anything beyond that is unrealistic.
We've seen a number of different trends become relevant across kind of the CPG category, from food to beverage to even technology products. Particularly, we've seen sustainability become more important. How important do you think it is for craft brewers to kind of tap into this trend and show how sustainable they are, since we have many players who seem to be really dialing this up in their marketing?
I think like all major manufacturing, there is certainly a tangible carbon footprint. And I think as breweries grow, chases sustainability in ways that are both beneficial for the economics of that brand, and of the manufacturing itself, is important. And I do think you're going to see that continue to be dialed up, because if the consumer is very purposeful with their, in a market where at least the perception, I think, of everyone, you and me, and potentially the point of this episode is consumers are drinking less but more purposefully. I think they would expect that out of their alcohol producers as well. And one way to acknowledge that is, the awareness a brand can show of their impact, positively or negatively, on the environment they're in. And as I mentioned, Westbound Down is a outdoor adventure focused brand, and we've had a charity series for I couldn't quote exactly how many years, but certainly the last 5 we've been focused on it, where we have approximately quarterly releases on things that, like most recently we did one called Reestablishing Greenback Cutthroats in the headwaters of Clear Creek, which happens to be our water source in Idaho Springs. Like, when they survive well in waterways that they're native to, It's a reflection of a very healthy ecosystem and a healthy waterway. Anyway, that's a hyper-specific example of a charity we've supported, but usually 1 to 2 of our charities are in kind of environmental spaces. But yeah, I think sustainability and how, CO2 can be recaptured and these things become very important, both for the economics of the brewery as well as the consumer just understanding that if they're going to drink purposefully, their brewers should and their makers should behave purposefully as well.
So before I let you go, I'd love to know a little bit more about something we chatted about briefly offline, which is kind of your take on Gen Z's increased participation in alcohol. What do you think is driving them to imbibe a little bit more? Because surely we all need to understand this a little bit better.
Yeah, so I've got some theories, but again, small brewery, selling a
Hmm.
lot of beer. Market research is not a department at
Fair.
Westbound and Down. But what I can say is I think the broader trend of people drinking less, I think is just that, a trend.
Hmm.
There has been multiple temperance movements, prohibition. It was more of what it was here in America, but you know, go back 100 years and temperance movements were all over the world, right? And then they just kind of went away. Um, so to think, I think humans in general want to believe in kind of a main character syndrome that they are leading totally unique lives to the others in the history of the world.
Mm.
When in fact, history, and I think historians love reminding us this all the time, if it doesn't repeat itself, it at least rhymes, I think Mark Twain said. And again, I think it's a trend. Alcohol brings people together. Beer, I think, especially brings people together. And at a time where technology is isolating us into bubbles, where even our workspaces are less interactive and certainly our social lives, people, they told us the internet was going to connect us all together. And boy, were they wrong. I mean, it's really just kind of put us all in boxes where you like a post or, you know, troll somebody on the internet. It's certainly not the social engagement I think that was predicted in the 90s
Mm.
at kind of the dawn of the .com era. And I think alcohol serves as the ability to bring us back together, both as a reason to get together, but also to kind of let our guards down and be who we actually are in spaces we've chosen to be in that's outside of the
Mm.
workplace. Like, right, we all have to show up for a job. You don't have to show up at a pub to meet a friend after work. That's why it's so special, is that both, whoever's there for that meetup chose to be there. That is, it almost feels like Instagram, or social media networks are places you have to be. Like people are sending you messages on it. It's rude not to check it to some degree. So those are also becoming almost spaces you're forced to be in, like a job.
Mm.
Whereas,
Mhm.
showing up at your favorite restaurant and enjoying a glass of wine or a beer or a cocktail is an option. And I think when people choose it, it reflects the willingness to let their guard down with the people they chose to be with. And I think those are becoming more and more meaningful moments. But again, bunch of theories, and I'm certainly not a market researcher. Gen Z, I think similarly, it's pretty easy. When times are really good, it's fun to drink. And when times are tough, drinking can be a relaxation. And certainly, these have been some chaotic times over the last 5 years. At some point, they had to cave. So that also might be that simple. Either that or they're just queuing in on the fact that most of their lives are pretty not social. And I
Mm.
think in a lot of these studies on longevity, like the Blue Zone, you're seeing people talk about how alcohol brings people together and how important that is in health and well-being. Overindulgence, I don't think anyone is defending. Um, but community and um, connectivity with others, I think, is at the core of mental health. So to forego all alcohol in the name of mental health, you better have some pretty good community activities otherwise to replace it. Otherwise, I think the benefits of not drinking might not outweigh the negativity of isolation.
So it's been great to have you on the pod, Jake. Thank you so much for that. Before I let you go, I would love to hear where our listeners can try Westbound and Down and what's next.
Yeah, so We are in about 1,000 on and off premise locations in Colorado. So if you go anywhere that has good beer in Colorado and they don't have Westbound Down, just ask them to get it. We're in all the Whole Foods, soon to be Safeways and Kroger's, but also in 600 independent liquor stores that have been the backbone of who we are in Colorado craft beer. So please don't forget them and go out and support them. There will very soon be a near Denver location that will be announced here shortly. We can't announce it right now. I promise you the beer is fresh. The music's great. The architecture is great and the food is excellent. So come hang out, connect, and yeah, thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jake. This has been great. And I look forward to the next time we're cheersing a fresh beer in person.
I know. Get out to Colorado.
Okay, fantastic to get the vibe there from the US craft beer scene. Now, let's ramp it up a bit by talking to a major player and a player that seems to be getting everything right. Recent financials for this company have smashed city expectations, and its 0.0 beer is going from strength to strength. So let's hear from Aileen Bentel, Head of Consumer and Shopper Insight at Heineken UK. Welcome, Aileen. Nice to see you after all this time.
Hi, Andy. Nice to see you.
So let's start with 0.0 because every listener will know that this was the game changer, wasn't it, for the no and low sector?
Yes, I mean, it's something that was a long time in the making. It's fair to say that there was a lot of focus on getting it right. And we kind of, I suppose we kick-started what's now the fastest growing category in the world, fundamentally. We could see the consumer trends that were starting and are continuing to grow around moderation, control, more of a focus on health and wellness. So kind of physical health, but also mental health within that. So very much leaning into those needs from a consumer perspective with Heineken Zero.
So it seems to have tackled a lot of those stigmas head on, hasn't it? And the advertising that you're now putting behind that is really next level.
Yeah. I mean, the stigmas are still there. They're lessening. So trying to normalize choosing a 0.0 is still something that we're working on. So we've addressed the quality issues, if you like, but there's still some of those social stigmas there. And part of the way that we're doing that is things like 0.0 reasons needed. So the campaigns that are coming. But also, I don't know if you've seen the F1 movie.
Did on YouTube. Yeah.
Okay, so we've had quite a long-standing association with F1 as a sport and certain drivers within the sport itself. But yeah, having kind of some of our creatives, including Brad Pitt and the stars of the movie, as well as the product placement, can only help getting that normalization over the line.
And you're now on tap, is that right? In over 1,000 pubs in the UK?
Yes. So again, kind of one of the biggest barriers when we would speak to people of why aren't you choosing, aside from the stigmas, was availability. That actually, if it's not there and visible for people to see, they're fundamentally not going to choose it because they can't. So yeah, we're actually at 1,400 taps now, which I believe is the biggest number of any 0.0 at the moment in the UK. I don't know if you've seen this, but we had quite a celebration when we got to that 1,000 tap mark with Gareth Bale, who's kind of our local ambassador for 0.0, I suppose, where we set a Guinness World Record of pulling 114 pints at the same time in different pubs.
All right. Yeah, this was the big pour that I was reading about. Now, look, a further sign of Heineken's sort of bullish take on the future of alcohol, I think, is your company's willingness to experiment, so much so that you've opened an experimental innovation hub in the Netherlands. Now, tell us about that, Aileen.
So you're talking about the Heineken studio there. So yes, that's actually part of the Heineken experience. So people that are over in Amsterdam and fancy going and exploring this, it's open to the public.
Oh, right.
I suppose innovation's in the DNA of the company. So kind of we've got a real focus on innovation, kind of moving with the times, making sure that we're meeting the needs of people as they evolve. So the studio is really exciting. I haven't actually been able to see it yet. I can't wait until I get back over to the Netherlands to go and have a look. but it's allowing us to test and learn. So fundamentally looking at things like bespoke beers, so where you can actually choose the bitterness level, the strength, the ABV level, the taste profile. So it's a really customized
Wow.
liquid that you get.
Mhm.
We've also got a few slightly weird and wacky options, including these flavored foam infusions, which isn't the easiest thing to say, but it allows different flavors in the foam to really create that multi-sensory moment. So if you're wanting your beer with a hint of guava or orange, kind of that will allow you to do that. And we've also got just things like small brews doing small runs of kind of experimental beers just to kind of test out different taste profiles, just small batch, and kind of get consumer feedback.
Yeah.
It's more looking at what are people interested in, really. And I mean, here in the UK, we have the benefit of our star pubs and bars so that we can do test and learn with some of the innovations that are coming through there on again on a smaller scale, not
Mm.
nearly as fun and interesting as the Heineken studio. I think it's fair to say.
But it's also fair to say, isn't it, that this experimental studio adds a layer of discovery to the potential things we might see from a Heineken in the future, even if it's a limited edition, for example.
Yes,
Mm,
no,
mm.
it's definitely exploring and pushing the boundaries, because kind of 10, 15 years ago, who would have thought about having a customizable beer available or different
Yeah.
flavors coming through? So it's all about exploration, innovation, and seeing what works.
Really exciting stuff, Aileen. One of the other strategic pillars at Heineken is, of course, premiumization. Where next there?
Yes, I mean, premiumization is something we're seeing across the category. It's one of our pillars. It's not the only pillar, I think it's fair to say. Growth comes from multiple sources. There's definitely been a desire from people in the last few years to have that more premium experience. And brands have really lent into that to make sure that we're meeting those needs. But when you look at some of the innovation we've had in the past year, actually only one of them would sit within that premium pillar. So kind of last year, beer and cider innovation, top 10, we had 4 of the top 10. So the premium one was Sale de Mare under the Birra Moretti brand.
Yeah, yeah.
But we also launched Cruz Campo, which hopefully most people will have seen on shelf. If not, go and have a look. It's an absolutely amazing beer.
Of course. This was the biggest off-trade alcohol launch in the UK in over a
Yes.
decade. That's
Yeah.
what I read. This
Yeah.
is true, yeah?
No,
Yeah.
it really gathered momentum very, very quickly. So yes,
Mm.
kind of a great brand, a great product.
And falls into this idea of transportive beers and transportive sips. There is a story that takes you to somewhere else, another place, and this brand was really much in the heart of that.
Definitely. It's got the history because it's from Spain, it's from Seville, so it's been there for many, many years. So people may have actually seen it while they've been on their holidays, but bringing it to the UK audience, and just that kind of that Mediterranean enjoyment and taste profile is kind of, it's a great one. But we've also launched Foster's Shandy. So those core lagers haven't felt the love so much, I think it's fair to say, over the past few years. But with Shandy, we've been able to bring in some younger consumers who maybe wouldn't naturally have lent into the Foster's brand.
Yeah, and it's another line into moderation, isn't it? Which
Yes.
perhaps has been neglected, but was always there. So,
It's a natural behaviour. So kind of
yeah, yeah,
how many people kind of would be quite happy going into a pub and asking for a Shandy
yeah.
if they were driving, if they were wanting lower alcohol levels for whatever reason. So yeah,
It's how I got into beer.
yeah,
Um,
there we go.
so we're talking about transportive sips. Here's a thing. If I'm not recording Impact Makers, I may be found on an Italian island, if not Sicily. Birra Messina is one of my favorites there. What are the chances we can bring that to a UK audience or even a global audience?
Low at the moment. I'm not aware of any plans. It's definitely a local jewel kind of within
Yeah,
Sicily.
it really is.
Yeah, no plans at the moment, but you'll just have to use it as an excuse to go on holiday again. so that you can enjoy it.
Okay, I tried. Well, look, thank you for taking the time, Aileen. It must be clear, I think, to our listeners that Heineken manages to stay rooted in its brewing tradition while being unafraid to experiment with the innovation studio that we talked about. So whether that's new draft experiences in Amsterdam or global creative campaigns, Heineken's story, I think, is one of momentum, isn't it?
Mhm.
Premium growth, the alcohol-free normalization, and innovation that just keeps beer exciting and relevant for the next generation. Thanks again, Aileen. We hope perhaps we'll bring you on again for the next exciting launch. But for now, thank you.
You're welcome. Lovely speaking to you.
Andrew, in growth spaces, you detail 16 opportunity areas for the industry. What can you tell our listeners?
Yeah, well, the first thing to say, I think, is that these growth spaces are mostly already in play. So I've got a lot of enthusiasm for so-called transportive sips. Now, these are beverage experiences that are capable of taking you to a different time or place or even emotion. And they come to the rescue, I think, of beleaguered consumers who just need a little escape now and then. I mean, we actually called out something similar, didn't we, in the episode about fragrances? So this is a growth space that transcends alcohol, but I think alcohol brands are particularly well placed to develop an offer here.
And as you say, many of these areas are already in play. Just this summer, we've seen a flurry of new product releases promising to deliver an aperitivo moment that's pioneered internationally by Aperol Spritz, of course. Sensorially, the bitter botanicals, oceanic herbs, and citrus-spiked nuance capture that holiday feeling that feels all the more alluring amid relentless downbeat news cycles.
Yeah, and I think Molson Coors and its rollout of Madrí Exceptional beer is a further proof point. And now Molson Coors is introducing another transportive brew to the UK audience, and that's the Monte Carlo beer. Now, this is framed as a blonde ale craft beer, and it's brewed in Monaco.
And this is almost reason enough to book my next trip to the UK. I think 3 of the growth spaces you write about in Growth Spaces Quarterly are home elevation, mini pleasures, and high ABV.
Yeah, so very quickly, the home elevation is recognizing that people at home are ready to upgrade their drinking experiences with these sort of next level liquids. Mini pleasures predicts increased demand for those sort of small daily glimmers that kind of make it feel more permissible. And high ABV is a recognition that I think every trend that comes out, there's often a counter trend. And in this case, it's high strength liquids in response to the sort of growth in no and low.
And one brand that appears to be riding all 3 of these opportunity areas is Moth Cocktails. So check out mothdrinks.com and you'll find a range of summer cocktails in little black cans. All the classics, Mojito, Cosmopolitan, Espresso Martini, in high-strength ABV, that's around 15% in this case. Last autumn, the brand closed a £4.6 million investment deal to help take this British brand stateside. Funds have helped this relative newcomer into Massachusetts and Florida, and they're even planning their first U.S. office. It's a move that puts them in direct competition with a U.S.-born contender, Dio Cocktails. Let the battle commence. To assess the threat, we've mobilized one of MMR's top sensory whiz kids and impact makers hero. Welcome, Harshi.
Hiya. I'll take the whiz kid.
We've showcased a number of brands on impact makers that shot to fame because of an exceptional product experience as opposed to huge marketing budgets. And Moth has to be one of them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Moth has really done very little marketing initially, and they've already set their sights on becoming the world's #1 cocktail brand.
So what have they done that's so very right, Harshi?
So Moth actually has a really well-crafted pack and liquid experience. And by the way, Moth stands for a mix of total happiness, which is yet another nod to people's growing desire for escapes. When it came to Moth and like how I actually came across it was, funny enough, going on a trip with my friends and looking for something that's going to be slightly above the average tinned cocktails, which are often super sweet and sickly and frankly feel a bit childlike, but also something slightly less sophisticated than wine. So Moth really sat right in the middle of those two, hitting the need that I was really looking for.
So how tough was this mission for you?
Well, it was one that I really was happy to take on, trying on these drinks. But in terms of Moth, when you're thinking about the actual product experience, they have a couple of different products, from the espresso martinis, the margaritas, the old fashions. The first thing that actually hits you is when you do open a can, you do get the aroma of quite an intense product. It's quite fresh and balanced. It does feel or smell like exactly what you expect. So, for example, I'm a big fan of a margarita. I'm very picky when it comes to a margarita as well. But getting that balance right between the acidity and the tequila and the triple sec, any one of those things being out of balance, and it really sticks out. But with Moth, they seem to have really nailed getting the balance of the cocktails just right. The other thing that stood out with the Moth experience was the can itself. It does feel like they have intentionally created a texture on the label of the can, which is actually like a bit rough to touch. So for me, that was kind of cueing a degree of intentionality and slowing down. It's not something that you should be rushing to drink with. And that texture on the can, it really kind of took me back to this like abrasion that's very similar to what you would expect when you're drinking a very like strong alcoholic drink. It's cueing to you that this is something to sip and savor. And every time you touch the can, it kind of draws your attention back to that moment of what you're consuming as well.
And does that texture on the can have a practical side to it? So does it actually promote a more comforting hold of that can? Because often they've just come straight from the fridge, haven't they?
Yeah, possibly. I think what the can actually does is replace some of the experience that a cocktail might put emphasis on when it's looking at glassware. So, for example, when you drink a cocktail, there's a lot of intentionality around the glass that is used for the cocktail. When you take that away and you put it into a can, you've lost a complete part of the experience. So, the fact that the can now has a degree of texture to it, it's small, it has a lot, like quite a immersive experience when you're holding it. They've kind of replaced the glassware experience with what it is that you drink in the can.
Mm. And they're quite small cans at 125 ml. So how does that play out with the high ABV? Because it is pretty strong, as Caitlin mentioned.
Yeah, so as you said, the cans are really small. They're 125 ml, and it really nails that mini pleasures trend that you wrote about. They really do feel indulgent without being overwhelming, but they feel like just the right amount. And the fact that it is 125 ml, it cues a degree of like intensity, and the fact that it is genuinely a full strength or a concentrated cocktail. And you don't feel like you're being cheated, that the cocktail is watered down. If it was any bigger than that, it would really make me question how concentrated it really is. They've kind of really hit that high ABV mark cleverly, because each tiny serve is still a full cocktail experience, and it really does pack a punch and feel satisfying.
We've loved having you on, Harshi, as always. This has been a great conversation. So with Moth, we have an experience that's not only convenient, but one that feels more intentional and premium and, dare I say, a tiny bit mischievous.
Must do better? That was Ben Branson's assessment of the no and low alcohol alternatives recently. He may have a point, of course, because most drinkers express a desire to moderate. So in a bit of a rant on LinkedIn, Ben said, "I am becoming increasingly uncomfortable and concerned about the amount of non-alc spirit brands setting themselves and consumers and the category up for disappointment." Now, to share what's behind this sentiment, I'm thrilled to welcome Ben to Impact Makers. Ben, how are you? You seem to hang out a lot in forests lately. How's that going?
Yeah, it's definitely my happy place. We're very lucky to be surrounded by woodland out here. And so, yeah, taking calls, meetings, taking people around the forest and the distillery. Yeah, I love trees. So very happy to be out in nature as much as possible.
How difficult was it to establish Seedlip in those days? Because there was no low and low category, was there?
No, there was nothing. And so on the one hand, it was absolutely wonderful because there were very little expectations. There were no category norms. There were no, oh, but this is how you have to do it. There was a lot of freedom in that sense to be able to kind of introduce, something new. But we were going against a $2.5 trillion industry, hundreds of years of norms, I guess, created with very strong belief systems about what drinks were and when you drink drinks and how much you drink and what it means if you drink a certain kind of alcoholic drink, a beer drinker, a wine drinker, lots of occasions already kind of set in stone. And so I was met with two extremes, really. And I was either called, a genius and oh my God, why has no one done this before? Why is no one putting out way better non-alcoholic options? Or I was met with, you're a lunatic and this is never going to go anywhere. And the big question everybody kept, or a lot of people would ask me was, what's the point? This was 10 years ago, but I would still argue that lots of those cultural belief and identity systems about our relationship with alcohol are still very much there. We've not kind of just totally flipped the script in 10 years, but it is dramatically better, and it's dramatically better because there's been an overwhelming increase in demand and awareness that whether we don't want to drink as much alcohol or whether there are better options if you're not drinking alcohol.
Well, clearly there has been a tipping point in No and Low's fortunes. What do you think that tipping point was?
So A, I don't think there's one.
Mm-hmm.
B, I think there were a series of moments or things that happened. The first one was probably amazing bartenders and chefs and key people in the trade thought Seedlip was amazing. So that legitimacy and validation, that was a big point because Seedlip wasn't just about Seedlip. It was about the idea that non-alc can be amazing and full of flavor, etc. So that was a very big moment. The second big moment, I think, was the world's first dedicated shelf in a supermarket for non-alc. And that was Tesco's. That was Tesco in 2017. And we were there leading the charge with them. That was an amazing signal, I guess. Because as you can imagine, it's really easy to kind of, where do I put this? Where do I put this? Because it's sort of not a soft drink and it's not alcohol. So where does it go in the store? How do people find it? Those are two. And then I guess the third one was, we took Seedlip to 35 markets in sort of 3.5 years. And so lighting a fire globally for a category, sowing the seed, to take your pun, I guess, amongst the world's best bartenders, restaurateurs and key industry folk in trend leading cities, I think is part of the reason why we now have a global category and why we have over 1,000 new non-alc brands.
Wow.
So that was number 3. Number 4 is when the trademarks joined. And so, Heineken Zero sticking $100 million behind their launch is incredible and incredibly validating for the category, the occasion, the opportunity, customers, etc. And so trademarks coming in predominantly in beer, I think, to increase the scale and the reach and the credibility probably for the space was number 4. And then I guess number 5 would be category cannot just live just with products and just with producers.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've seen is an ecosystem created around a set of products across all aspects. So whether that's awards, events, festivals, journalists, influencers, books, podcasts, suppliers, producers, retailers, the whole ecosystem is there to kind of support a growing category. And then I guess the number 6, which is playing out now, is we can see the contraction in alcohol materially playing out across share price across, alcohol businesses closing, for example, government, World Health Organization starting to put out reports about safe levels of alcohol, advertising restrictions. Like, we can start to see the kind of top down now, 10 years later.
When you wrote on LinkedIn, your essential argument was that the industry is setting itself up for a fall with the emphasis on mimicry. But do you see that continuing to play a role? Do you think that the future of this category ultimately lies in new to world liquids?
The best people to mimic an alcoholic product are the people that make alcohol. So the trademarks, the alcohol trademarks, who've built massive businesses with huge operations and an incredible amount of expertise, I think is absolutely valid. And this is my personal experience. I cannot see the fun or the interest in trying to copy something. I kind of can't see that when there's a whole body of people out there who are looking for new things and discover new tastes, and they don't necessarily want the replica or the copycat or the imitation. And we've got, 47,000 edible plants, and we've got 73,000 tree species. We've got infinite combinations to be able to make wonderful things that are absolutely delicious and slightly more unique. The challenge with that becomes we need to give some safety and familiarity to the consumer. We need to have some reference points, some anchor points for people to kind of go, I kind of have an idea what that might taste like. I kind of know when I might drink that. They're really helpful things to build in, rather than kind of going, oh no, throw everything out and just make something really crazy in a completely different format that doesn't speak to occasion, that doesn't speak to taste or kind of serve. So yeah, I don't believe we need new to world brands that are directly mimicking alcohol. I believe the trademarks can do that better than anybody else. And I believe that we have this amazing opportunity from an innovation perspective for new brands to, kind of pave the way for what non-alc kind of liquids can be and can taste like.
Yeah. And this is exactly what you're doing, Ben, isn't it? With Pollen Projects.
So Pollen Projects is effectively the owner of two independent brands, Season, pair of cocktail bitters, driving into that kind of, Angostura, 200-year-old, 85% market share, $300 million monopoly, making it easier and simpler and faster to transform your mixer or your soda or your cocktail with 3 dashes of, absolute kind of jam-packed flavor. And then Silver is our distillery and maturation lab, where we make aged non-alcoholic spirits from grain and wood that you can sip slowly. And that's driving into, global luxury aged spirits category that's a $26 billion kind of beast.
And how are you aging it? What's the secret?
I've asked myself the really simple questions of, why do we put liquid in a barrel? Why does it have to be a barrel? Why is 90% of those barrels made from one single tree species? Why does it take so long? And why did we wait 100 years for an American oak tree to grow to only make 2 barrels from it? Like, these are the kinds of questions I guess I've been asking myself. And so I've developed a process that uses oxygen, pressure, time, temperature, and ultrasound to extract the organic compounds of taste, flavor, and color that you find in wood to mature our liquids. So we are extracting the same compounds that an alcoholic spirit extracts from a barrel. We're extracting those same compounds in a different way.
And I have to say the result, because your hazel edition of Silver has been the talk of the office, the Impact Makers office this week. What has been the reception with those all important bartenders and retailers?
So we only launched just for Christmas last year, our first release, and that sold out. And Hazel, that you've just mentioned, has also just sold out. And we're just gearing up for our third release, Silver Orchard, spoiler, that explores fruitwood. And that'll launch in the next 10 days. And that's already, half of it already sold out privately without even kind of talking publicly about it. So that's kind of exciting. Silver's in Selfridges and Berry Brothers, and we've had some fantastic whiskey makers and key trade people to the distillery to come and have a walk in the woods and see how we do things. Feedback's been excellent, and we are served in, I think, 8 of the 10 3 Michelin star restaurants in the UK.
That's fantastic.
Coupled with probably 25, 30 other Michelin star restaurants, 5-star hotels, top cocktail bars. The Fat Duck is doing 6 bottles a week. It's a tiny little restaurant. And we are just in the process of setting up our next distillery in upstate New York, where there's amazing produce, grain and wood, to try and build a global local brand and produce close to our produce. That old idea. Yeah. So, it's really early days, but it's exciting. And I'm massively enjoying working with this wonderful material of wood and learning about trees. And I think we've tasted over 200 different tree species to date.
Yeah. Yep.
And they're jam-packed full of flavor, and nobody has ever talked about it.
Now, listen, we've loved having you on. Listeners, where can they go if they want to register for the next limited release from Silver or investigate pollen projects or season? And that was SEASN, right?
Yeah, we dropped the O.
So where do they go?
So a few places. www.silverlabs.com. That's the Old English word meaning of the forest.
Like it.
So that's Silver. Seasonyourdrinks.com for season. You can find me at Seedlip_Ben. Seedlipdrinks.com for Seedlip.
And possibly having a rant on LinkedIn.
And possibly, definitely. I'm writing a rant about pubs at the moment, Andy.
Well, I'm glad you did, because that's why we're here together today. Ben, thanks for spending your time with us.
Thanks a lot, Andy.
Goodbye.
It's time for our regular rattle through the world of TikTok. And with us once again, we have Shania from the Together Agency. Shania, yet again, you have an impossible task with everything, everywhere, all at once on the TikTok platform. How do you know where to start?
I don't think it is possible to start, Caitlin. It's more about keeping up. If we could extend the Z factor by about 3 hours, I could tell you about the iced blueberry latte trend, which has gone viral because of its striking tricolour presentation. Then there's the spicy Savvy Bee, which is a glass of chilled Sauvignon Blanc spiked with frozen jalapeno slices. I could babble on about the Gen Zs who are increasingly camping in the bathroom to scroll social media, listen to music, vape, and otherwise shut out the pressures of the outside world. Here's a post from FactSquish that explains all.
Have you heard of bathroom camping? It's trending like crazy right now. It's when people literally hide out in bathroom stalls to decompress. Not to cry, just to escape the noise. TikTokers say it helps them mentally reset during stressful moments. Some even bring earbuds, tea, a journal. I've seen laptops, snacks, even LED lights. They turn a public stall into a mini personal retreat.
It's hard to be flippant about this because it feels like young people have the weight of the world on their shoulders, and that's significant. Now, we wanted your take on some of the adult beverage trends in the here and now. What have you got for us?
So, Aperol Spritz remains the drink of the summer over on TikTok. It's the definitive transportive sip that brings European vibes to ordinary settings, like a post-work happy hour. And it's of course linked to aperitivo. Likewise, it's an easy and accessible beverage to DIY at home, with little prep time and few ingredients. Let's eavesdrop on the party.
Ich trink heute, das ist kein Witz. Aperol, Aperol, Aperol Spritz, kein Glühwein und kein Hugo und auch keinen Uso. Ich trink heute, das ist kein Witz. Aperol, Aperol, Aperol Spritz und noch einen hinten dran, damit ich schlafen kann.
Vincent Gross clearly having too much fun there. And what's keeping Aperol ahead of TikTok are the number of bartenders serving this now infamous drink in huge glasses, often with sparklers and always to amaze customers.
I'm sure we'll all be joining in with Vincent late into the evening. What else do you have?
We've covered innovations in the hydration space a lot on Impact Makers. So I'm going to add to this narrative with unwell hydration.
Okay, you have our attention.
And that's the point. Framing is everything if you want to make it big on TikTok. The offer needs to feel new to the world and stir creators' appetite for new and novel. Unwell is a brand created by podcaster and influencer Alex Cooper, meaning her fans will buy into the beverage. It's an electrolyte drink designed to boost energy and overall well-being. And it's available now in Target. Unwell sees unique and trending flavors, such as blackberry acai and orange hibiscus, together with colorful and bold packaging that Gen Z swoon over. This is how one TikToker reviewed the product.
I tried these Unwell drinks the other day. I drank one while I was doing homework, and I swear, I literally told everyone, I was like, I felt like I was a machine. I could not stop doing homework. I was so, zoned in. It was crazy. So I have a lot of studying to do tonight, so naturally I went to Target and bought 3 more of the Unwell drinks, only to look at the bottle and see that it's rapid hydration and focus, which I didn't know before, and it works. It totally works because I've never done so much homework in one sitting in my life and felt good about the work I was doing. It was incredible.
Now that's really interesting. When you examine the semiotics of the Unwell brand, it's the perfect example of an anti-brand. Many young people are feeling burned out by the pressures of so-called toxic wellness culture. And this brand takes a different turn. It's playful, a little chaotic maybe.
Well, brands that take note and action a little of what Unwell has achieved could find themselves trending on TikTok for sure.
Okay, we've got time for one more.
Okay, we can't end this episode without referencing the latest beverage craze on the platform, and that's matcha. Coined the Gen Z drink, matcha is popular for its vibrant green color and ability to mix with flavored syrup. Think blueberry, vanilla, Kinder Bueno, and even Dubai chocolate. Matcha beverages are easily achieved DIY at home, but Blank Street is one particular coffee shop that seems to be doing it right for Gen Z. Recent flavor combinations at Blank Street have included blueberry matcha, cookies and cream matcha, and salted pistachio matcha. Here's what Charlotte Emily Price, 99, has to say.
Can't believe I was the first person in the world to try the new salted pistachio matcha from Blank Street.
Blank Street have decided to release one more summer drink before the end of the season, and it's salted pistachio matcha, which sounds like my heaven. And I've got a non-matcha drinking friend here, so we're going to get her verdict as well.
So the new drink is in collaboration with Tash Pistachio Milk, and oh my god, it's so good. So they're using Persian pistachio, pistachio cream, and Himalayan pink salt in this drink, and it just tastes incredible.
Well, let's hope that Black Street doesn't start delivering to bathrooms. We may never see Gen Z again. We'll see you on the next episode, Shania. Keep on keeping up.
See you soon.
Time, gentlemen, please.
Well, Caitlin, I think this has been one of our most probing episodes yet. What's clear, I think, is that alcohol's future isn't going to be saved by tinkering around the edges.
There's enough evidence to show that the world has changed. People aren't short of options for how to fill their time. Technology has stepped into spaces that used to be human, and that means if alcohol wants to be part of people's intentional lives, it has to earn that space all over again.
I think so, and we've already hinted at the job to be done here. Pretty early on in the episode, we think that alcohol has an opportunity to be the antidote to all this tech-driven disconnection. And I think that's a big, powerful purpose for the modern age. But it's not automatic, and it's going to have to be designed into the liquid, to the rituals, the whole experience.
I agree. It's got to pull people off of the sofa, away from their screens, and into moments that are alive, moments you can't swipe, scroll, or automate.
And I think this means more than just better tasting drinks, folks. We're talking here about something more deeply immersive. Drinks that carry a conversation, brews that feel like events, cocktails that bring a spark of theatre to the table, things you want to talk about, not just drink.
That's the mission, and that's the invitation, and maybe that's what's next for alcohol. Thanks for listening to this episode. You can find the Growth Spaces report, What Next for Alcohol, by going to nmr-research.com and follow the links.
So thanks again to all our amazing guests. We really do appreciate their time to talk to us. And if you're out there and you feel like you've got something to say, reach out to us on our LinkedIn page or via @ImpactMakersPod on Instagram. Join us next time for some more industry vibes.
Until then, we're raising a glass to you, listeners. Cheers.
Cheers.